I want to welcome you to the Engineer Your Success podcast. I am your host, Dr. James Bryant, and I have the pleasure of having Mr. Randy Iwasaki here as a guest on today's show. Randy and I go way back. I've known Randy probably for about 15 years, and I've been able to kind of see him as he's continued to accomplish great things in his career. And Randy, I am so thankful for you agreeing to be a guest on the show. Randy, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing well, James. It's good to see you. I retired from the public sector after 38 years and transitioned over to the private sector to a small startup company called Amazon Web Services. So it's every day is day one. They try to think of themselves or ourselves as a startup company. And so they're constantly trying to reinvent ourselves, trying to focus on the right things. We have a number of leadership principles. So it's almost like Caltrans,
Mm-hmm.
where you have a vision, you have mission, and you're constantly trying to deliver a program faster, more efficiently, more effectively. I think that's one of the kind of parallelisms that I see between the public sector and the private sector is constantly reinventing ourselves, making sure we're focused on the right things. And so it's been a whirlwind of almost 2 years, but I'm doing really well. So thanks for asking,
Well,
James.
well, that's good, man. And so, tell the listening audience a little bit more about yourself. We'll include your bio is going to be in the show notes. It's going to be there with the write up, but just to give people a flavor in the background of the internationally acclaimed speaker that you are.
If you're asking how I got started in the public sector business of civil engineering, I grew up in the Central Valley of California, and my father owned a gas station and a repair shop. So I grew up working on cars. In the Central Valley of California, it gets very cold in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
It gets very hot in the summer. And I remember telling my dad that, it's very cold today, Dad. And he would say, civil engineers don't have to work outside. They can work inside in a heated office during the winter. And then during the summers, I would say, God, it's hot out here, Dad. And he'd say, civil engineers, they can work in the air-conditioned office when it's summertime. And that was his way of saying, you can work here at the shop the rest of your life and take over the shop, but there's probably a better place for you. And my uncle was a professor at Colorado State in civil engineering. And we used to visit him every now and again, and he would take me to the lab and show me the projects that he was working on. And I thought to myself, if my uncle can do it, I can do it. Now he
Yeah.
was a PhD type like you. He was very smart. And so I mirrored my career after my uncle. And that's, it's one of those early mentors that wasn't trying to be a mentor, but made an impact on me.
That's pretty cool, man. I never knew that. So when I was growing up in Philadelphia, my father owned a auto body repair shop. And so we used to go over to the shop and help him, whether it was sanding the cars, priming the cars, getting them ready to be painted. I think I saw so many cars that I'm not a car guy now because I had to work on cars. I think back then it wasn't so much of the joy. I do have fond memories of spending time with my dad, just whether it's masking a car, getting it ready, for painting, and just spending that time. But at the time, I was thinking I need to go to school for something else because I don't want to do this.
Yeah, it's funny how your parents kind of guide you in different ways, maybe not so directly, but indirectly by making you work at
Yeah.
jobs that aren't maybe the best for you, but it teaches you how to work with your hands.
Mm-hmm.
Teaches you the fact that you probably don't want to do that the rest of your life, like
Yeah.
your father, your parents. And I always wanted to learn how to paint, by the way. I did sand my car. So my dad, one of his good friends, owned a body shop in Reedley, where I grew
Mm-hmm.
up. And he painted my pickup. It was lacquer. And
Yeah.
so he primed the car and then the truck, and then he said,
Mm-hmm.
sand it. And I remember sanding with a sanding block with that wet, dry sandpaper.
Yep. Yep.
And every time I'd take it into the auto body shop, he would put his fingers over the metal and say, it's not smooth enough.
Yep. Yep.
And I couldn't feel any ripples in that paint, but he could feel the ripples in that primer. Says not smooth enough because you'll see the undulations in the lacquer.
Mm-hmm.
We spent a
So
lot of time sanding.
No, yes, yes. So, that's pretty interesting. I never knew that we had that similar connection because although we've known each other for years, we've never had that conversation. That's pretty cool. So, okay, you go to school, you get your degree in civil engineering. Did you immediately go start working for Caltrans then?
So it was eight. I graduated in 1982, and there was a recession, and the advisors that I had at Cal Poly said, "Don't go to work for the public sector. You probably want to work for the private sector."
Okay.
So because of the recession, there weren't very many jobs, and so I remember going to Caltrans office and signing up to take the test. In those days,
Hmm.
you had to take a written test, and then you had to take a verbal test,
Yep.
and to get on a list, and you needed to be in the top three ranks in order to get hired. And so I remember I was so excited because I was still working in my dad's shop after I got a degree in civil engineering.
Hmm.
And I got a letter from San Francisco District 4 office saying, "We want to offer you a job." And I immediately accepted. I was so excited to become a civil engineer after
Hmm.
waiting about 6 to 8 months before I could finally start my career. And then LA District 7 emailed. I got a card said, "Come to District 7." I said, "Wow, I'd rather work in LA than San Francisco."
Hmm.
And then I got two other cards, one from San Luis Obispo, District 5, and then one from District 6, Fresno, where my parents lived.
Yeah.
Spent 5 or 4 years in San Luis Obispo going to Cal Poly. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to live at home in Reedley and then go to the District 6 office in Fresno.
Yeah.
So I did that for the first couple of years until I bought a house in Fresno. But I remember that I was making more money than I could spend because I was working such long hours. I was living at home, basically paying my parents a small stipend to rent
Yeah.
a room to help them out. And then my mom had my shirts ironed and my jeans ironed for the next week to work. It was, I thought I was Warren Buffett. Seriously, I mean, $1,460 a month. And I thought I was the richest person next to Warren Buffett on the planet because I
Well,
just was saving so much money.
yeah. Well, it's not so much. It's not how much you make; it's how much you're able to keep, right? And how much you're able to invest. And so, you were in a situation, where you were able to kind of be there with your family. You were able to help them out, and you had all of the comforts of home. That was pretty cool, man.
Yeah, meal waiting for me.
So okay, so you're there in that district, and you eventually move. You go to work for Caltrans in a different district.
So I spent, so I went through the Caltrans has and still has a great rotation program where the incoming group, at least for the engineers, we get to rotate through construction
Hmm.
design, and then we have some electives that we can choose. And so I ended up rotating through construction inspection, and then I was surveying. I started in surveying, then went to construction, then went to hydraulics, and then did a short stay in traffic, and then ultimately ended up in traffic design.
Okay.
And then when I got registered, they put me as a resident engineer in Visalia, and I didn't want to be a resident engineer, so I complained about it to this. There was only one senior in charge of all of construction for District
Hmm.
6. Fresno's a big district, and it was Bob Waddington. And Bob said that, in order for me to move up at Caltrans, you needed to make sure you understand how to deal with the front office, your constituents,
Hmm.
contractors, money. You want to make sure you don't break jobs and things like that. And so
Yeah.
that you learned as an RE will help you move up. And I said, I don't want to move up at Caltrans. All I want to do is make $3,000 a month, and I'll be even richer than Warren Buffett. But I ended up going out to construction, which really taught me a lot about how to manage people,
Yeah.
both on the private side as well as the Caltrans side, and then deal with contracts, money, and then really personalities and people. And from that respect, and one of the last pieces of advice that Bob Waddington gave me when I was headed out to construction was, it's okay for a contractor to make money. They bid to make money. So in essence, don't short shrift the contractor and think that's a big victory, because if you put the contractor out of business, especially subs and
Yep.
their DBEs, pretty soon you don't have any contractors bidding your work, and then you wonder where did all the contractors go? Well, they're not bidding your work because you put them out of business, or they don't want to bid your work anymore. So I thought that was a really good piece of advice from Mr. Waddington. And actually, he moved from Fresno, and now he lives here in Contra Costa County.
Oh,
So I took
cool.
he and Sherry out for lunch one day. Thank him for being a mentor to me, even though I
Yeah.
didn't want to go and ultimately had to go. I mean, it was a very good career move for me. So
So
then
wait a
I
minute.
left.
So wait a minute. I just want to make you go from getting $1,400 a month. You're saying all I want to do is to make $3,000 a month. I'm good. So you go from that to being like the director of Caltrans. So tell us a little bit more about that journey and what were some of the success principles that, as you look back, you were able to kind of pick up and glean to help you along your career.
I think first of all, I had great mentors. Pretty stubborn, and when I am headed down the wrong path, I don't always admit it. And my mentors would tell me that I'm going the wrong direction, or these are the things that I need to do in order to improve myself. And I actually still call Dick Weaver's a good mentor of mine. He lives in Montana. I call him every year, actually more than once a year. And we talk. And I call Bob Waddington. I met him for lunch. Bob Coleman's another big mentor of mine. I call him every holiday season to talk to him and
Cool.
Patty and thank him for being a mentor. But I think my career was really directed by the mentors at Caltrans, because one of the problems we had at Caltrans is when Governor Brown was governor a long time ago in his first 8 years. At the end, he laid off a number because I would imagine it was a bad budget cycle. So he laid off the middle managers or the young people at Caltrans. So when I got there in '83, there was no middle managers. It was either very old or you're really young. And so the very old, the seasoned veterans knew that they had to get the younger group ready to go to take their places. And that's really what I love about Caltrans, and what taught me about in those days about succession planning. It's important to make sure that you have people that are ready to go to take your place, because you never know when you're going to leave, and you want to leave any organization better than when you found it.
Yeah.
And that's what they really taught me. So I was sent to Sacramento in 1990 to start project management with a group, and we implemented project management. So we developed a training center called the Project Management Academy.
Mm-hmm.
Have a manual on project management manual. We developed that, and really we started focusing on project delivery and using project management tools, project controls tools, and it was really, really helpful for me in my career.
Okay. That is cool, man. I'm, and by the time you and I got together, I think you were already the head of Caltrans, and you were working on a TRB committee with Sharp 2.
I think I was the deputy director in charge of maintenance and operations when we met. And
That's true.
I worked on, and I love research. I love TRB. I volunteer my time for TRB because I tell the young people that ask me about why is TRB important to me is because you get on these panels where the topic is a passion of yours, but it's also a passion of practically everybody or all the people on that panel. And you learn so much in the interaction as you develop the research results. And it's been a very good part of my career is being part of the Transportation Research Board. In those days, the SHARP program, a lot of very old timers, which I am now, I guess. But in those days, I was very young, but we helped put together that $450 million list of projects that are kind of concepts that we would focus on with that $450 million that would help solve these near-term and long-term kind of issues that were plaguing DOTs and delivering, like we had making bridges longer lived or making our infrastructure longer lived.
Yep.
Deal with congestion, reliability, and then of course, top priority is safety. And then I think if I remember right, Congress cut the allocation in half, but we still went with the renewal program, which I led for 2 terms, the reliability, capacity
and safety.
Yeah, and safety. And a lot of great outcomes, but I still think, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this. I still think the renewal program was the best. I think we had 38 different projects that we delivered, like jointless bridges, composite pavements, things like this that would help further the art of the possible for transportation people in the next generation. So I think some of those they're still using those tools.
Yeah, they are
improving on those tools.
Some of those tools are still being used. I know a lot of those things were taken up by the Federal Highway Administration and AASHTO in terms of moving towards implementation. And as I look back on my career, it's really great to be able to see products that I worked on, that I shepherded through the process from the initiation of the research to the completion and helping with implementation, seeing those things actually being used in the field.
That is a great feeling when they use the results of the research for actual projects in the field. That is
Yep.
really cool.
Yep. So it's really cool being able to make that connection. So for some folks that may not be familiar with the transportation arena, we're talking about the Transportation Research Board. We're talking about the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. We're talking about the Federal Highway Administration. All of these players in the national that are involved in national research is what Randy and I are kind of having this discussion. In a particular program where Randy and I met was the Strategic Highway Research Program 2, and we were working on the Sharp 2 renewal focus area. Randy, you bring back fine memories of the meetings that we've been involved in. But looking at your career, so you left Caltrans, you went to Contra Costa County, and then you've left the public sector and you're working in the private sector. Earlier, you talked about that transition, how it reminds you a little bit of Caltrans, but how you're kind of working through every day like a startup. So let's talk about what exactly are you working on these days? What's happening now?
So I lead the transportation vertical at Amazon Web Services, and we focus on anything that moves people, goods, and services. So we focus on airports, seaports, transit agencies, parking, DOTs, DMVs,
Mm-hmm.
MPOs and COGs, and toll roads. So
Mm-hmm.
in transit. So that's the 8 sub verticals, and we're really hired as business development managers, but we focus on getting into talking to agencies personnel about modernization of their IT functions, data storage, data analytics.
Okay.
And I think the transition period for me was when I was at the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. We always used to compete for US DOT grants. We only had 20 people, but we thought of ourselves as fighting above our weight.
Mm-hmm.
We go toe to toe with just about anybody in the nation to try to go after those precious research grants. And we ended up getting the automated driving system grant and put together a $30 million proposal, but we had to store connected vehicle data. And so autonomous stuff, when I interviewed them out at Gomentum Station, the largest secure autonomous vehicle test bed in the United States, which I founded in probably 2013, they said that these vehicles put out about 20 terabytes of data an hour.
Wow.
And so I asked my team, which you have two options. Do you want to give up your offices for server racks, or would you like to, let's go to the cloud? And so they came back, boss, we're going to go to the cloud. I said, well, analyze which is the best cloud. And they came back and said AWS, Amazon Web Services. So I said, go get the account manager. And it was Rob Cassetti. And so Rob came in with Scott Braley, and we ended up negotiating a contract. And then the team said, hey, Randy's going to retire here pretty soon. And then they asked if I was interested in leading the transportation vertical, which of course I said yes, because as you know, and I think you're as well, as through the time that we were together at working on TRB issues and Sharp 2 specifically, you really see how technology can help leverage and enhance the ability to do things like safety
Yep.
or throughput. I mean, it's amazing the amount of leverage power if you have the right technologies that you can accomplish. And I've seen that over my career. So I was really excited to at least compete for a job. And then ultimately I was really excited when I got the job.
Yeah. That's great, man.
And so I think to further that there's just really a great opportunity to think outside of the box and think about the art of the possible when it comes to safety, for example. I think that I remember back when Secretary Mineta first was appointed back in 2001,
Mm-hmm.
he said, safety is my top priority. And I think right around 43,000, there was 43,000 fatalities on our roadways in the United States. I think last year was close to 43,000
Yeah.
fatalities on our roadways in the United States. And that's 21 years ago.
Yeah.
And the three E's, while they're important, engineering, enforcement, and education, I think that the technology leveraging aspect is going to really help us drive that fatality rate to zero. And I think working together with the 3Es and technology, we'll be able to achieve that goal of nobody dying on our roadways in the United States anymore.
Okay. So learning to leverage technology to help us achieve our goals in transportation and in life, and how, technology can absolutely be leveraged to our benefit.
Absolutely. I think that's an area that we could do more work with and work on
Mm-hmm.
together. I think TRB has been one of those areas where they've taken a look at how technology can help. I remember being on one of the special report for climate change and potential impacts on transportation. And you look today, that report's old now, but when we worked on, we talked about it's going to get hotter.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to snow less in areas or snow more in areas. It'll snow in areas that it didn't snow before because
Yep.
now the lakes aren't frozen over and you're gathering moisture through the lakes through evaporation and now snowing in areas. So you got to buy snow plows.
Yep.
They're lowering train speeds because of the expansion of the rail because it's getting really hot. And so I see a lot of the work that we did a long time ago is starting to pay off if people would look at that and then figure out, okay, and then how do we stop this increase in greenhouse gases? How do we deal with that? Well, part of it's going to be technology.
So how do you see that, or do you have any examples or your thoughts on moving into the future? So 10 years from now, I'm going to be giving you a call as you're one of my mentors and be like, Randy, I want to thank you for being a mentor. It's really been cool. What's that conversation going to be like in terms of how technology is changing our lives at that time?
Well, hopefully it's a positive conversation. Hopefully technology has helped us in our daily lives. I think I'll use automation as a good example. When
Okay.
we started testing self-driving vehicles and we were looking at level 5, level 4, kind of level 3 even, we said, oh yeah, we're going to the automobile manufacturers will deliver level 4 vehicles in X amount of years.
Mm-hmm.
And we passed that date and they're still not out. Why? Because the environment is more complex. But I think what you're going to see is as we progress and we start using automation in areas like delivery or in long haul trucking or other areas, commercial areas, you're going to see some great impacts on the ability to deliver goods, the ability to get to goods in underserved areas, the ability to provide mobility options in underserved areas. And I think it's going to be a good conversation in 10 years. We'll talk a little bit about in 10 years, probably a reduction in an increase in safety. I
Mm-hmm.
see more cities are focused on Vision Zero plans,
Mm-hmm.
lower speeds, but get people to where they need to go within a reasonable time.
Yeah.
And not killing people along the way. I just see a great conversation in 10 years about the ability to leverage the technology that's going to be available then, and it's going to be a good story. One thing I would add is if you look about 14 years ago, the invention of the deployment of the iPhone, it
Mm-hmm.
put connectivity in your pocket. So you look at innovation is pretty linear, flat over the first since 1800s. We're still cutting ribbons on rail expansion, and that's 1800s technology. But you look at that, and you look at back 14 years ago, Steve Jobs in wherever San Francisco said, "I'm introducing this iPhone." You look at the technology, the innovations has just skyrocketed. It's gone way up. And I only wish that I was 20 years younger to take part in the next 20 years of leveraging that technology because I think
So do you think that the exponential growth was a result of the technology enhancements, or was that were the enhancements driven by the demand?
no, I think that the technology drove innovation. You have connectivity in your pocket. So the TNCs wouldn't be around if you had to drop a quarter in a machine or make a phone call from a phone booth in order to get a car to come pick you up. I mean, that's just not going to happen. You look at some of these on-demand ride services, these platforms that are developed. It would be impossible without that connectivity. And so the younger people are using that connectivity to develop things like Airbnb.
Hmm.
You can go rent a house somewhere, and for a vacation, you can actually. We're looking at maybe renting out our swimming pools. There's an app where you can rent out your swimming pool for an
Wow.
afternoon. So
I've never heard of that one. That's a new one for me, Randy.
these things would not be possible without that connectivity, that personal
Yeah, and
connectivity.
what I would say is that I don't know if the companies would have been driven to continue to innovate if there wasn't demand. I mean, I know they had to see some demand, but demand has to absolutely be there for people to buy the products, to use the products, to be able to continue to support that innovation. And whether that demand is immediate or 5 years down the road, that company is looking and forecasting where is that demand going to be.
Well, I don't think startups do that. I think when you think in terms of, I'll use Uber, and if my story is correct, hopefully, the two founders of Uber are sitting in Paris, I believe, and
Okay.
they couldn't catch a cab, and one of them said, "Wouldn't it be great if only we could hail a cab using our phone?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if?" So that's a great way to start your conversations about a problem you're solving. Is, wouldn't it be great if we could whatever? And I think you look at that, and it would not have been possible without connectivity,
I
without
don't.
personal connectivity.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think you absolutely have to look at what problem that you're solving, and when you're crystal clear on the problem that you're solving, that puts you on the path to continue to create and to innovate and to provide what your customers need and what they want.
Yeah, we have a great process here called working back. So we work backwards from the problem. So we really spend a lot of time up front working backwards on defining what the problem is we're really trying to solve. Because many times we try to solve a problem and we get down to the end, it's really not the problem, and we wasted all that time. So we spend more time up front working on definition, and then it's easier in some cases to solve the problem. So you're actually trying to solve the right problem, that rather than just figure out guessing what the problem is.
No, I mean that is cool, Randy. I really appreciate your time, spending some time catching up and talking to me. Are there any other parting words or success principles that you could share with our audience?
I think if you're a young engineer, I gave a speech the other day for the ASCE Region 8
Hmm.
Awards Banquet in Spokane, Washington. And I do this every now and again. When I'm up there, and I ask, because there's students there, they're sponsoring a number of scholarships, and I ask, where are the students sitting? Well, would you please raise your hand? And typically the students are all at one table.
Yeah.
In this case, they were all in one table, and there was a guy to my left, in not the head table in front of me, but the one next to it on my left. When I was looking out at the audience, I said, I could see one thing for sure here. This guy was late. And am I correct? He said, yes. I was late to the event. I can tell that because you're not there with your friends. You're actually the smartest or the luckiest guy here. Why? Because everybody at your table are people that are going to hire you one of these days. So you want to pass out your card. You want to get to know or get their card and get to know them, so that there could be intern opportunities and or ultimately a job opportunity. And you other people in the back, students, you need to mingle, because these other people tables, these are the people that are going to hire you one of these days. And you don't really think about that. You want to go to an event like that. You want to hang out with your friends,
Yeah.
but you never know when there's a great opportunity and someone can open a door for you that you're sitting next to, and all you did was just get their card and start a relationship. And there's a young lady that's wrote a book that I met her back in probably 2015 at the ITS World Congress in Bordeaux. And she asked me these kind of questions. And I said, networking is really important to me. Mentoring is really important to me as well, because I was heavily mentored, because I needed a lot of mentoring growing up. But it's important to me, and I spend time doing that. And so she's actually finalizing her book, and there's a quote in there about just that. It's about networking, and don't sit in the same place. Don't sit where you feel comfortable. Sit maybe at a function where you don't know anybody at the table, and talk about what you do and what your passions are. And you might be surprised that later on there may be a door that's opened by one of the people at the table, and or maybe a job offer. And you just never know these things. But try that. I tell you, if you're a young person starting out in the industry, try that. It might help you later on in life.
No, that is great, man. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate that advice. And I'm going to end this podcast episode like I end every episode. And that is, many people know what to do. Fewer people know how to do it. And there's a select group of people that actually follow through and do it. Those people are able to execute and live a life of meaning and live out their dreams. Randy Iwasaki, I want to thank you for being part of that select few. Thank you for your time for this interview.
Thanks for the invite.